Are you too busy, too stressed out, unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Hello and welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. I'm Diane Randall, your host. Thank you for listening, and if you're new to the show, welcome. It's so exciting to have you here listening, and if you like what you hear today, share this episode with someone. Balanced Living for Busy Professionals provides the best inner tools and strategies to help you break free of any habits, patterns, or attitudes that may be keeping you stuck in place. And it doesn't matter how busy your schedule is, you can create the life you want. That's what this show is all about, is to support you in your life with the changes that you want to make to create a high quality life. In the episode today, I'm talking to my guest about the importance of being a leader of service in the organization today. My guest, George Ramsay, is the Director of Training and Development at 4 Oaks. He's an experienced leader whose leadership spans more than 15 years. George has fostered relationships that are focused on his ability to develop high-performing teams of stakeholders that are invested in the mission, vision, and goals of the organization or the workplace, whatever work organization that you're a part of. I am so happy that George is here to share his experience. Not only his experience from the workplace, George is also a retired leader from the military. And I'm just so happy that he's here to share his experience, his wisdom, as well as what it means to be a servant leader. I'm so happy to have George here. I'm going to be transparent. George is my brother-in-law, and I'm just so grateful that he's here to talk to us about servant leadership. Hey, George.
Hey, Diane.
I was very struck. George invited me to listen to a presentation he did on servant leadership. And it so resonated with me because I had been hearing that term, but I hadn't taken the time to really listen until I heard George's presentation. And he talked about being of service in the organization or the workplace, and it really, really resonated with me. So I invited him on to talk about his experience. George, I want to know what your experience was like under a traditional leadership. George was in the military for many, many years. So what was that like, and how did you shift from that to servant leadership?
Well, I spent just over 30 years serving in the Army, and throughout my entire life, I had been really developed to be the kind of leader that got people to do what you wanted them to do because you told them to do it.
Right.
And for years, I mean, that was how we were raised. And so, I remember one time someone told me that you could make those soldiers push a nickel up the hill with their noses. And that was a time when to hear something like that, kind of made you stick your chest out. Like, wow, okay, yeah, that means I'm really leading them. And over time, I realized that I didn't want to be the kind of leader that my soldiers feared. But instead I wanted to be the kind of leader that was really encouraging, and inspirational, and really wanted to be able to inspire people to want to pick that nickel up and carry it up the hill, rather than always having this idea that when you're in leadership positions, you're in charge and you don't have to listen to other people, and people just do what you say. And so I had a shift, many years later where my mindset started to change about, what type of leader I wanted to become. And there was this period where I even thought, I don't want to be the kind of leader I always had. I want to be the kind of leader I always wanted.
I love that.
And so that's kind of when, my shift really, really happened. And I would say that, probably five or 6 years ago was when I started to really think about my role as a leader and what it meant to have people under your charge every day, and how really people could be just as productive following an inspirational leader as they could someone who, in my opinion, was very toxic.
And that's so interesting that you say that. And one of the reasons that this resonated so deeply with me, I had my shift in terms of being of service outside the organization. And then over time, I kind of brought it in as part of who I was. It wasn't, it wasn't that I had this, shift. It's just that over time, I started looking at my clients in the workplace as of being service, because as a person who I guess was in leadership, being a consultant, I felt differently toward people. But when I put myself in more of a service or giving role, I changed the way I looked at them. And what so resonated with me is this servant leadership, this word, these terms I've heard, at least for the past year. I just didn't take the time to really look into it until I heard your presentation. Because in the past, like you said, you did what you were told. The boss was the boss, and you did what they told you, and all your goals were defined based on the bottom line of the organization. So how has that changed when it comes to nurturing individual goals of people in the organization? You're retired now, and how have you brought that into a different role?
Well, so when I think about servant leadership, what I think about is what Robert Greenleaf, who was the scholar who was thought of to be the first to coin this phrase of servant leadership. I think about what it means to serve people, even as a leader, rather than serving people as a leader. I think that, when I first started learning about servant leadership, my understanding of what that meant was that you place the needs of other people first. And I didn't really understand that to be a true servant leader meant that I had to have a desire to want to serve, to be the kind of leader who serves others, rather than being the kind of leader who is always out front and who is always leading people. And so I've kind of taken that attitude of servant leadership, and even today, I find myself in my current role, in my new profession since I've retired now, where I'm serving as the director of training and development for a large nonprofit, where now I'm taking those same thoughts and practices of serving those people that we lead every day, to really being able to develop our current leaders, develop our supervisors, to move from this idea that I'm here, I'm in charge, this is what I do, but really helping them to develop themselves to become better leaders, because we have leadership is a great responsibility, and there are those people who are going to lead who believe that the old way, the way that I was brought up, that I'm in charge and I'm here, and what you say doesn't matter because I'm the person in charge. But leadership is more than just approving time cards and making sure that positions are filled. leadership is about being present. It's about being visibly present and showing vulnerabilities at times that allow those people that you lead every day to really see deep within you and to know that you are there for them just as much as you expect them to be there for you.
So, George, if leadership requires service, where do you begin as a leader? How does that manifest in your life on a daily basis in small ways?
Well, for me, I really had to study. During my graduate studies, I studied organizational leadership, and that's really where my transformation started. As I began to learn more about what leadership meant, it really started to shape, my thinking around what it really means to be a leader, and how being an honest leader, and the kind of leader who is full of integrity, and also full of compassion can produce the same types of results that really I was getting from being this tyrant every day. In fact, what I found was that I was more successful than I was in the past, and so I think that in today's workplace, it is really necessary for leaders to truly understand who they are, and what they want to be able to accomplish, not just for themselves professionally, but how they're able to guide those people who work for them to be able to establish goals that make them just as successful in fulfilling their roles as we want to become, serving in that leadership position. And so, it's really one of those things where you really have to understand who you are, what it is you want to accomplish, and how you can inspire other people to be able to help make you successful as a team, and get away from this. I used to have this disease called the me, mine, mine disease.
What is that? Tell us about that.
Well, that's where everything you say is about me. It's I did this, or I'm doing this, or this is my team. This is my project. When I started this, I did this. When in reality, it was really we, or our, or us. I say that the only cure for me, mine, mine disease is the we, our, us cure. I'll tell you a funny story. So I remember once, as a young leader, standing before one of my superior officers, and I was giving a presentation, and I had it bad. I was saying, I did this, and I'm going to do this, and he stopped me, and he said, if you say me or I one more time, and I thought about that, and I was like, wow, everything was about me, and you hear that in a lot of workplaces. You hear a lot of people say me or I or mine, and in reality, it's about us. It's about the team. But it's about what we're doing to accomplish this, to be successful.
And I hear what you're saying, the old traditional workplace, and I'm still in and out of the workplace because I have corporate clients, but I grew up like you in a workplace model that was very self-serving, and you got credit, you got promoted based on what you did as an individual and how that met the bottom line, the goals of the company. So that has been the traditional leadership model. And this is what I am so happy about, is that you're actually saying being of service is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And it's coming from the inside out. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and people want to know that you care, and they'll go and they'll stand at that water cooler and they'll talk about you. They'll talk about how selfish you are. They'll talk about how much you don't care. And when you're doing the employee satisfaction surveys and the question comes up and it says, I trust my supervisor or I trust management, and those numbers are really low because if you've ever had one of those surveys done or the personal assessments that are done and people rate you based on your leadership ability, and you sometimes have to swallow that tough pill, where you're thinking you're doing great. Oh wow, I brought pizza in this week, so they should love me for that. Those are the kinds of things that really drive you and give you this false sense of accomplishment. And then you get these surveys and you look and you see that people really haven't bought into your style of leadership. People are leaving. People aren't excited about the work that they do, and it shows. It shows every day in our workplace. And so the key is really to be able to develop people. And I'm living proof that you don't have to be a young leader to make this transformation. I had been leading people for years before I finally transformed, and it was really because the more I read, the more I began to understand what leadership was about, and that leadership was less about control and being authoritarian, and it was more about inspiring people and really raising the level of consciousness of those people that you lead to really be able to think in the same manner that you think about being invested in your vision, being invested in the mission of your company, and really being invested in the same goals that you're invested in to be successful. That was a really easy transformation for me. I had some sleepless nights, thinking about, who I was and what I had done in the past. And I'll be honest with you, I literally sat down at my computer and picked up my telephone and called many of my former soldiers and apologized, for being the kind of leader that I was. And I wanted to assure them that, that I'd made this transformation and that, here we are, having many of the same types of successes that we were having when I was treating people really bad and pushing them really hard to get things accomplished. And it felt good to be that way.
So it sounds like you were able to see a bigger picture, and part of the healing and the journey was to apologize, from what I hear you're saying.
Yeah.
And that allowed you to move forward and be that person that's more in service than a tyrant, as you called yourself. But I hear what you're saying.
In the Army, we call it toxic leadership.
Is that right? Oh, they call it that in the Army? They actually say that, toxic leadership?
They say it,
Wow.
We call it toxic leadership. And needless to say, I was very toxic at one point. But I feel good today. My level of self-care has improved. And so now, I'm not as wound up as I used to be. Now, and don't get me wrong, even in that state, I was still always that same leader who was going to be in the middle of things. I did always come to the idea that a leader is one who is always involved and who is always a part of everything that is going on. And so, you could find me, in the middle of the pile. You could find me, with a shovel in my hand. And so I was always that kind of leader. But, on the flip side of that, I was the kind of leader that says, listen, if they're going 6 feet deep, we can go 7. So let's push this other foot and let's get deeper. And so you really push people, harder and you wore people out. And that was the kind of person I was. And so now, I'm in a position now where I feel like I could, really get people to want to go 7 feet because that's how hard they want to work, because they want to show that they are invested in what we're trying to do. And so it's been a really good ride.
That's awesome. So what would you say to a leader who is listening to this podcast right now and they haven't quite heard what servant leadership is all about? Where would you tell that listener to start if they said, man, I want to change. I don't like this old model anymore. It's not working for me. What could they do tomorrow?
The first thing I would tell them to do is to be honest with themselves. You're going to have to be honest with yourself about who you are and the type of leader you are. That would be the first thing. The second thing I would say is to decide what type of leader you want to be. Do you want to be a leader who serves others, or do you want to be a leader who is there simply to lead? There are a lot of folks who believe that the true measure of leadership is based on the number of titles you possess. If you look at their resume, you see that they were in charge of this and they were in charge of that, and I'm the leader of this. True leadership is not about the number of leadership titles you possess. It's about what you're doing to improve the lives of others, developing those people who work for you and truly being able to serve them. And so, I would say, hey, be honest with yourself and decide what type of leader you truly want to be. And then the last thing I would say is to continue to improve every single day and understand that as a leader, you can be vulnerable. It's okay to show vulnerabilities as a leader. It's okay to be open and honest about what your expectations are. And because people are truly watching you and they want to know that they can trust you. They want to know that they can depend on you. And so, you're going to have to show those types of vulnerabilities at times that allow people to know that you're human. And so if you're able to do those three things, I think that you can then begin to transform your way of thinking and your way of being to be the kind of leader that's necessary to produce high performance among those people you're in charge of, as well as to really be successful at what you're trying to accomplish within the scope of your responsibilities. I could talk about this all day long. I mean, it is. I had lunch with or coffee today with a couple of ladies who one is the executive vice president and the other is the director of organization development and human resources, and they both work for a company called Foliance, and Foliance is it's a media company. They own the newspaper here in Cedar Rapids and several other holdings companies, media companies, news stations, radio stations. I mean, they just do a number of things in the community and are branching out of the state. And they wanted to meet with me today, all because of the presentation that I did on servant leadership. Their CEO, the owner of the company, was present in the audience during the presentation. So he and I had coffee a week later after the presentation, and then he wanted me to meet with his executives to kind of talk about my idea of leadership. And so I've just been doing this all day, and I could I could write a book, about my journey and my experiences and everything that I've done and everything that I'm learning about being the kind of leader that I always wanted. And I mean, this is just fun to me.
And sounds like helping others to become a different kind of leader, more of a servant leadership. That is just beautiful. I really love this subject. I mean, it just resonated so deeply. I'll just be honest with you. I just never, when I was in corporate America, I just never liked a traditional leadership. Do what I tell you to do, and
Right.
and your bottom line is whatever I say it is. So I was always out on the outside, looking around, trying to fulfill myself in different ways. So I got to the point where being of service was the way for me, and it changed my attitude in the workplace. Even when I go in now, instead of seeing my clients as people who drive me nuts, I always ask myself, how can I serve these people? How can I serve them? How can I help them to get the best results out of the day? And that has really shifted my thinking in a big, big way. So to have you say that a traditional organization, the leadership is now thinking of themselves as being of service, that is just huge.
Yeah.
That is huge.
And it's, so this new organization that I'm working for now, in my current role, they've been established. I mean, they've been around for 43 years, and there's a deeply embedded culture that exists within our agency, and we have approximately 150 managers or supervisors who work for our agency, and so you can imagine the types of things that go on that are said. For how we manage our staff, and it's one of those kinds of things where people really have to want to be more. They have to want to be the kind of people who inspire other people. And we always do introductions whenever we come together for meetings, and one of the things that we do during our introductions, we call it PIEs, physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual feelings. That just really sets the pace for the meeting to let people know where you are physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually before the meeting occurs, and then to let them know whether or not you are in with them during the meeting. So I'm checked in or I'm checked out, just to really set the stage for the meeting. And so we follow that up at the end with our personal mission statement. And so my personal mission statement is to inspire others to excel. But then we follow that up with our shadow mission, which is really a definition of what we truly are, in contrast to what our mission is. And so my shadow mission is to talk more and listen less. And so
to talk more. Oh, I get it. Your shadow.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. So my shadow mission, to inspiring others to excel is to talk more and listen less. And which really means that, I understand that at times I can be selfish as a leader, and that I still understand that there are things about me personally that still kind of succumb to that me, my mind disease at times. And so I really work hard to ensure that I'm always thinking about us.
But it's about starting where you are, being authentic about that, and embracing that shadow, because it is part of who you are. The beautiful thing is you acknowledge that and you know that, and when it shows up, you can acknowledge it and say, "Oh my goodness, there's that mean mind person showing up," and then move from there. George, talk about some of the challenges with this servant leadership model.
Well, I think the biggest challenge is not necessarily in those we lead, but it's really within us. Of course, if you ask people about their leadership styles or who they are as a leader, you'll often get people who will say that that they want to lead. I'm a born leader. I don't know that we're born leaders unless we're twins, and one comes out before the other. I mean, you're not born to be a leader. There are some people who serve in leadership roles and who will always serve in leadership roles who are no more a leader than anything else. And so just because we take on this role and we feel these leadership roles does not make us a leader. A leader is someone who understands what those people they're leading need to be able to be developed, to be able to perform, to be able to reach their full potential. And and it's not about. I mean, heck, you can go to the military today, and I'm sure you could be in corporate America, and you'll find people who are in charge that don't know what they're doing. I mean, they're not leading people; they're in leadership roles. And so, this idea of wanting to serve people, wanting to be in a position to serve, this idea of service is about encouraging people. It's about being there for people. It's about truly showing people, how they can really raise their levels of consciousness to reach their full potential. And so, it's not about being in control. And so, a lot of people will be led to believe that, I'm only a leader if I'm in charge. And so, I'm reminded of a book that I read in one of my classes, and I forget who the author is, but the title of the book was The Journey to the East. And in the book, there was a group of men who were being led by a servant, and all the while while this servant was a part of their group and guiding them, they were having many successes. They were climbing to heights that they had never been to before. They were very successful at what they were doing, and then one day the servant went away, and when he went away, they became very dysfunctional, and they found themselves constantly being challenged in everything that they were trying to accomplish, and years had gone by, and you could almost think of it as they had been lost out in the wilderness for years. And so many years had gone by, and they had come back in contact with this guide. And almost from the moment they came in contact with him, their spirits had been lifted, and they found themselves being highly encouraged to continue to do the things that they were doing, and they were finding that they could be more successful again. And what they realized was that all this time they thought that they were leading the servant. The servant just simply served as a guide, and what they didn't realize was that this guide was truly leading them in a way that allowed them to be very successful. And so, thinking of that in ways where where you're thinking about the kind of work that you do every single day, and and the kind of people that really motivate you and your teams to be able to perform. A lot of times, that's not the person in charge.
It's not the person in charge. I can tell you, there's like people that I meet or that are, it's like 3 people in my life. I can go around these people and I can just talk to them, have a phone call. I can see them, and I swear I get something that I want to either change or do better in just from being in their presence.
And isn't that something? That's a form of leadership.
Yes.
I mean, that's what servant leadership is about. It's about having this feeling in your gut that makes you
inner
want
aspect.
to be better.
Yes, want to be better.
That makes you want to be better, and all because of this feeling you get from service and from being around people who are inspiring and who are encouraging, and not solely from people that are just there to run things and there to be in charge. I talked about that in my speech. My presentation talked about this idea that that many people believe that their leaders, when they're looking for leadership in the community, they're often looking to our elected officials, because they're our elected officials, and so we've already chosen them to be the leader. Or they're looking at, the church pastor. And in some cases, people automatically equate the, leadership to, in a football setting, the leader being the quarterback on the football team.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've been conditioned to understand that, on a football field, the ultimate leader is the quarterback. You even hear it on the defensive side. He's the quarterback of the defense. When in all actuality, it may not be the quarterback.
Well, it sounds like it's really, like you said, it's going inside. And I know for me, it's listening to that voice and that gut. And when you're in the presence of these people, you know it, you feel it. And you're just having a conversation. And like you said, they may not be your boss, but because they are in your presence, you just want to be a better person.
That's it. And you work harder. You perform harder.
Yeah.
You're able to reach heights professionally that you may not have accomplished. A lot of people, I know I did, a lot of people shut down under toxic leadership.
Yeah.
And toxic leadership will cause you to underperform.
And it makes you sick.
Yes. You can't go, you go home, that's all you want to talk about. And, I mean, it's all you can think about. And, I don't know about you, but, I get in my car and I got to call somebody when I get in the car. Every day I leave home, every day I get in the car, I'm calling somebody on the phone,
Yeah.
Soon as I pull out of the garage every morning, I'm calling a buddy on the phone, and, there used to be a time where, I would get in the car and, you think about it all night long and you toss and turn and all you can think about is, I just don't want to go to work tomorrow. I just don't feel like this.
It takes you over.
And all you can think about is when you get in the showers, how much you just don't want to be there. And then you get in your car and you call your friend on the phone, and all you're talking about is how much you don't want to be at work. And then you pull in the parking lot. And while you're sitting in the parking lot, you're trying to pump yourself up. And, and finally you just say, man, let me go on and get off this phone, man, and get on up in here. And you take that big old sigh, and you get out of the car, and then you walk in the door, and it just hits you. Oof. And you realize how exhausted you are before you even get there. Yeah. And it really heightens the leader's ability to become more of a micromanager in your everyday role than really taking on this form of macro leadership or macro management, where you don't have to have someone who is constantly telling you what to do. And during those early years, I can recall having soldiers who would, that they would only do what you told them to do because they always felt that no matter what they did, they were going to be wrong and you were going to change what they were going to do. And so they constantly waited on you to tell them what to do every day.
Yeah. 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 I mean, that is such a normal thing when you're in a toxic environment. It's like, I remember being younger, feeling that way, why should I exert myself and put my best foot forward when you're just going to redo it, or say, well,
right.
How come you didn't put that in there or that in there? And then I'd go, well, why don't you just tell me what to write?
Right. And so I just retired in September. And so I can remember even as far back as just a year ago, being in that same type of position with my leaders and having this feeling after all these years, here I am being micromanaged like I'm a kid in high school or something. And no matter what you did, you take it in and you already know before you even take it in, it's going to be wrong. So you just kind of give half an effort, because that he's got to come up with his own way of wanting to do something. And you start thinking to yourself, well, if that's all, if you're going to nitpick and you're going to change everything, why didn't you just write it?
Right. It sounds like servant leadership. There has to be a lot of trust. Has to be.
There has to be. And that trust comes from both sides.
Right.
It's it's about developing that circle of trust that lets those people that you serve know that you're there for them as much as they are there for you. I've even changed the way that I communicate with people, and even in my role today, I will tell people, look, I'm here to support you. I'm here to serve you, and don't think of me as someone who is here to change how you function and how you operate. Think of me as someone who is here to be able to help you improve the way that you guide and lead your staff. And two, I talk to staff members about creating goals and understanding what those expectations are every day. A funny story. So I was out visiting a team maybe a week ago, and there's this idea that as leaders, we should be encouraging, and we should praise our staff. And so I heard the supervisor telling everyone, hey, I just want to thank everybody for coming to work today. I'm really glad that you're on my team, and I'm so glad that you're here. And she kind of left it at that. And so at the end of the meeting, I was talking to her, and I said, it's great that you're showing, a level of praise and appreciation for your team. I said, but if you don't back that up with expectations, then all it becomes is just talk. And I told her, I says, I don't want to sound like the bad guy, but I expect people who work for me to come to work every day.
Right.
So, I would not thank someone for coming to work today. That's an expectation.
Right. I was sitting here thinking that, but well, and is that authentic? I mean, is it really authentic?
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's not authentic. I mean, it's like you're reaching for something to praise people for.
But
but it happens every single day.
Well, I also feel people start right where they are, whether, like you said, they're in management or supervisory roles. They can't give any more than what they have.
Right.
They just can't.
Right.
Right. So that's funny. So everybody's a work in progress, sounds like.
Everybody is, even those who seem to think we have it all figured out. And when I go around and I talk to people and I'm meeting with people all the time, I've had a lot of experiences in my life that I have so much of my own material to share, and I use myself and my kids every day to as examples for how we develop and how we change over time.
Right.
And I've experienced a lot, and it's been, it hasn't been a bumpy road. I've been very successful, and I've won a lot of awards and been recognized, lots of times because of all of the successes that I've experienced in life. But, I've also walked away, with this very shallow feeling, at times too. Even after accomplishing all of those things, you just kind of look in the mirror sometime and you say, wow, was it really worth that?
Or that there's just still more work for you to do. And how
Absolutely.
Awesome is it for you even getting recognized externally that you realize inside you still have work to do. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. I just love our conversation. I could really go on and on and on. Thank you so much. George, I want to thank you for being here, sharing your experiences, giving us some insight into what a servant leadership model looks like. I know it certainly feels more intimate, more embracing, and more caring, which is an interesting concept for an organization, but I think it's really beautiful. And you've really helped us to understand what that means. And you've given the listeners something that they can take away and really add to their leadership concepts, knowledge. And you've given leaders that are listening things that they can take away to add value to who they are as a leader in the workplace today. So I want to thank you for that. If you want to know more about George, his LinkedIn information will be in the show notes as well as his website. So George, thank you so much. And I want to hear from you. I want to know what you thought about this episode. Leave your comments or voicemail on the Balanced Living for Busy Professionals website. Your feedback helps us to bring the best topics and information that you want to hear. Information that can help you make the small, simple changes that can create a huge difference in your life.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please, feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.